welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be talking about something I think pretty interesting today. Islamic prayers that are specifically focused on finding relief from debt and financial hardship.
Oh, wow.
Prayers for paying off debt and seeking ease.
I see. So even if someone listening in isn't necessarily, familiar with Islamic traditions, I think they could probably get something out of this. I mean, who hasn't struggled with financial stress at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a different perspective on it. So, I'm curious, in Islam, I know the act of prayer is known as dua. Can you just give us a little bit of background on that?
Yeah, so dua is really about directly communicating with Allah.
Yeah.
You're seeking guidance, support, just solace in different parts of your life.
Yeah.
And that includes when you're facing, money problems,
Yeah.
financial challenges.
So when we're talking about these prayers, is it just like, hey, I need to win the lottery or I need a financial windfall? What's sort of the mindset behind turning to these prayers when you are dealing with financial difficulty?
I think it's a lot deeper than that. It's not about a quick fix. You're not just praying for money to fall from the sky. You're really trying to cultivate some patience. You're seeking strength to become more resourceful and, really aligning yourself with a higher power to kind of get through these challenges.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the article outlines 4 specific prayers for this purpose.
Right.
Can you walk us through that first one? What's it about?
Sure. So the first prayer is interesting because it asks Allah for sufficiency
Yay.
in what he has made halal.
Halal. I mean, most people have heard that term, but it's more than just like what's permissible, right?
Exactly. It's a much deeper concept in Islam.
Yeah.
You're talking about an entire ethical framework that guides various aspects of life, from what you earn to what you consume to just making sure that your financial dealings align with Islamic principles.
So it's not just about having enough, but it's about how you get to that enough.
You got it. You're finding contentment and peace in what's ethically obtained. And recognizing that true wealth goes beyond just money, right? It's about spiritual well-being and living in accordance with your beliefs.
Right.
And what's really cool is that this prayer also asks for protection from negative emotions that come along with financial burdens. Anxiety, sadness, weakness, all that.
So it's like a holistic approach to dealing with debt. It's not just the money problem, but it's also that mental and emotional burden.
For sure.
What about the second prayer? What's that one focused on?
So the second prayer echoes that theme, asking for protection, from weakness and hardship. But it specifically mentions the oppression of men.
Oh, oppression of men. That's interesting. What's the significance of that?
I think it highlights those social and relational dynamics that can get mixed up with debt sometimes. Some people might be taken advantage of or face strained relationships because of their financial situation. This prayer is about seeking protection from that harm.
So again, it's recognizing that it's not always just this personal struggle with finances, but there are these outside forces and these social dynamics at play as well.
Definitely.
So we've got 2 prayers down. Tell me about the third one.
The third prayer is short and sweet. Just a plea to Allah for ease. You're just asking for some divine assistance to remove those obstacles and make the path a little bit smoother.
Yeah, that's universal. Like everybody's felt that way at some point. All right, so what about that final prayer? What does that one say?
So the final prayer kind of brings all these themes together. You start by acknowledging Allah's power over everything, the sun, the moon, the whole universe. And then you're asking to be free from debt, have sufficient provisions, and to be able to use your senses and your strength to serve Allah.
So it's sort of like surrendering to a higher power and recognizing that we're not in total control and just seeking that guidance and support to overcome whatever we're going through.
Yeah. And what I find interesting is that none of these 4 prayers are just saying, get rid of my debt. It's about adopting a mindset of resilience, ethical financial practices, and seeking that divine help.
So you're not just waiting for it to happen, you're also taking responsibility for making changes.
Absolutely. It's acknowledging that Allah provides the tools and resources, but we have to use them wisely and make choices that align with our faith.
That brings up an interesting question. Do other faiths have similar prayers or rituals that are for dealing with financial hardship?
I think many faiths have practices that encourage you to be mindful about how you spend your money, how you support your community, and how you find strength when things are tough.
Yeah, it seems like the idea of sufficiency is something that resonates across cultures. So let's say someone listening isn't Muslim. How can they take these principles and apply them to their own lives?
I'd say a key takeaway is the emphasis on seeking halal earnings. It's about being mindful of where your money comes from, making sure it's earned ethically. Think fair trade, sustainable practices, responsible investing. It all ties into that concept.
So it's like a spiritual call to be a conscious consumer and align your spending with your values.
Precisely. And another takeaway is that focus on finding inner strength and patience when things are tough. These prayers seek refuge from the emotional burdens of debt, the anxiety, the sadness, that feeling of being inadequate. They encourage you to cultivate resilience, knowing that challenges are just part of life and we can overcome them.
Debt can be really isolating. And these prayers remind us that we can seek support, whether it's from a higher power or from a community or even just our loved ones. Just remember you're not alone in this. What else can we kind of take away from these prayers? What other insights can they give us?
Well, I think they really highlight the importance of shifting our perspective. Instead of seeing debt as just this purely financial problem that needs to be fixed, we can see it as a chance for spiritual growth and building resilience.
So even in difficult circumstances, we can find meaning and purpose.
Exactly. It's about more than just dollars and cents. It's about personal growth and aligning your life with what you believe in.
I really like that. So we've talked about halal earnings and ethical spending, but how does Islamic finance specifically address those things?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's a topic that deserves its own deep dive. You see, Islamic finance has a rich history and unique set of principles that guide how it operates. It's a fascinating way to look at how to approach finances ethically and responsibly.
That sounds like a perfect way to transition to the next part of our deep dive.
I agree. It'll be interesting to explore how those principles connect back to the prayers we've been discussing.
So you mentioned that Islamic finance has its own set of principles. Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, one of the core principles is the prohibition of riba,
Okay.
which is usually understood as interest.
Yeah, I've heard of that. But I'm curious, like, why is interest seen as a problem in Islamic finance?
I think it comes down to the idea that interest can be a form of exploitation, where lenders are benefiting at the expense of the borrowers.
Mhm.
And that goes against the Islamic emphasis on fairness and justice in financial dealings.
So it's about trying to create a system that's more equitable?
Yeah, exactly. Islamic finance aims to create a system where everyone involved in a transaction shares in both the risks and the rewards. It encourages investments that are backed by real assets, things you can actually touch and feel that have a clear purpose, rather than just speculative ventures that could be super risky and uncertain.
So promoting stability and responsible growth. Are there any other principles that are important in Islamic finance?
Yeah, another big one is gharar,
Qarar.
which basically refers to excessive uncertainty or risk in financial transactions. So it discourages those investments where the outcome is totally unpredictable, because that could lead to huge losses for one party.
So it's not just about how much money you could make, it's also about understanding the potential downsides and making sure everyone involved knows the risks.
Exactly. Transparency is really key.
Yeah.
And beyond fairness and transparency, Islamic finance really emphasizes social responsibility. And this can take many forms, like zakat, which is a form of charitable giving,
Okay.
or waqf, which is dedicating assets for things that benefit society.
So it's not just about personal wealth, it's about giving back and contributing to your community.
Yeah, it really highlights that connection between individual financial success and the overall well-being of the community.
It's a much more holistic approach, where ethical principles are integrated into every aspect of earning, spending, and investing. And I can see how these principles align with the prayers that we talked about earlier.
Right, that emphasis on sufficiency in the prayers really resonates with the Islamic finance principle of avoiding risky investments and speculation. It's about being content with what you have and using your resources responsibly, not always chasing after more and more and more. And, the focus on halal earnings directly connects to those principles of fairness, transparency, and social responsibilities that are so central to Islamic finance,
Right.
making sure your wealth is acquired ethically and used for good.
Absolutely. It really provides a framework for making financial decisions that aren't just good from a practical standpoint, but also align with your spiritual values.
Totally.
It's really interesting to see how these ancient principles can offer such a fresh perspective on navigating modern finances. Do you think that these principles could be applied by people who aren't Muslim?
Oh, I think so. Concepts like fairness, transparency, and social responsibility are universal values. They can benefit any financial system.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot to learn from Islamic finance, regardless of your background or your beliefs.
I agree. It offers a refreshing alternative to, the sometimes cutthroat world of conventional finance. It reminds us that finance could be a force for good, promoting social justice and contributing to the well-being of everyone.
That's inspiring. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about something we mentioned earlier, the emotional burden of debt. It's one thing to deal with the financial strain, but there's also a real emotional toll that comes with it.
Oh, absolutely. Debt can weigh so heavily on you, It can create so much anxiety and stress and even feelings of hopelessness. And the prayers we discussed earlier really acknowledge that emotional side of debt, and they offer a way to cope with those feelings.
So, besides prayer, what are some practical steps that someone can take to deal with that emotional weight of debt?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to acknowledge those feelings and validate them. Don't try to bury them or pretend they don't exist. Allow yourself to feel the weight of the situation. But don't let it consume you.
So, acknowledge it, but don't dwell on it.
Exactly. And once you've acknowledged those feelings, it's important to reach out for support. Talk to someone you trust, whether it's a friend, a family member, a therapist, or even a financial advisor.
Find someone who can listen or offer guidance.
Right? Sometimes just sharing your struggles can make them feel a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the power of professional help, too.
Like a therapist can help you develop strategies for managing stress and anxiety, and a financial advisor can help you come up with a plan to actually tackle the debt itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't have to go through this alone. There are resources and people who can support you.
It's good to remember that even in the midst of financial struggles, there's hope and help available.
And remember the message of the prayers, too. Seeking strength and solace from a higher power, building resilience, and sticking to those ethical financial practices.
Yeah, it's about finding that inner strength to overcome these challenges and create a brighter future for yourself.
Exactly. And those are principles that can really benefit anyone, regardless of their financial situation or their religious beliefs.
Well said. This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic, though. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
Wow, this has been such an interesting conversation about these Islamic prayers and Islamic finance. I mean, there's just so much to think about here. And it's amazing to me how these old practices can still be relevant and helpful to us today, as we deal with these modern money problems.
It really is remarkable how these principles still hold up, Even in today's crazy financial world, they offer a kind of timeless wisdom, that can help us approach money matters with more, I don't know, awareness and purpose.
Yeah, and one thing that really stuck with me is the emphasis on patience and inner strength. These prayers aren't about like a quick fix. It's about developing that resilience and trusting in a process.
You're absolutely right. Dealing with debt, especially if it's a lot of debt, can be a really long and tough journey. It takes dedication and discipline and a good dose of perseverance, that's for sure. Yeah. And it would be so easy to just feel overwhelmed and discouraged along the way. So how can someone who's dealing with debt, like how can they cultivate that inner strength they need to keep going?
Well, building resilience isn't just a one-time thing. It's something you have to practice, you know. It's about creating those healthy habits and coping mechanisms that can support you through the whole process. One really powerful practice is mindfulness, taking the time to connect with the present moment and observe your thoughts and feelings without judging them.
So instead of letting anxiety or fear take over, you learn to acknowledge those emotions, but not let them control you.
Exactly. It's about creating some space between you and those emotions,
Hmm.
so you can respond to them in a more clear and intentional way. And another important practice is self-compassion.
Yeah, that makes sense. Debt often comes with a lot of shame and self-criticism.
Yeah, it can be really hard on you emotionally. Self-compassion is about treating yourself with kindness and understanding, recognizing that everyone makes mistakes and that you're worthy of forgiveness.
So it's like silencing that inner critic and replacing it with a voice of support. What else can help build up that inner strength?
Don't forget about gratitude. Focusing on what you are thankful for, even when things are tough, can really shift your perspective. It helps you appreciate the good things you do have in your life.
Yeah, finding those moments of joy and connection can remind you that life is more than just your financial situation.
Absolutely. It's about cultivating that sense of abundance, even when you're facing scarcity.
This has been a great conversation. I've learned so much. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into these Islamic prayers for debt relief, what's like one key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that true wealth isn't just about what you have in your bank account. It's about finding contentment in what you have and cultivating ethical financial practices and knowing when to reach out for help and support.
It's a powerful reminder that even when you're struggling financially, there's always an opportunity for spiritual growth and resilience. You know it's about aligning your actions with your values and finding strength in your connection to something bigger than yourself.
That's a great way to put it.
I hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and some inspiration as you navigate your own financial journey. Thanks for listening.